Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And I'm joined today by Andrew. Andrew, can you please introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Andrew Joyner. I'm the CEO of Hyperscience. We're an AI software infrastructure company based out of New York City.
Tell me a little bit more about how governments are using generative AI, what you've seen in that area in the last couple of years.
It's interesting because the public sector and the federal government in particular has actually been using AI for quite some time. They use it in a
Mhm.
lot of areas like logistics and warfare. And now we're bringing it into back office functions that support civilians.
Mm.
And because of that familiarity with AI, the governments are actually quite progressive at understanding the challenges of utilizing AI to build the models and to use them for the efficacy of work. We found them to be a leading industry. There's so much opportunity for the government, not just to be more efficient, but more effective.
Mhm.
And I think generative AI and AI in particular is going to lead us to realize some of those benefits that we all promise and are excited to see.
Mhm. Now, one of the challenges, of course, with generative AI is that a lot of people are worried about losing their jobs. And so, what do you think will be the impact of generative AI on government staff workers?
Yeah, at the end of the day, these models and the AI themselves, they need oversight, they need supervision. And so,
Mhm.
in many ways, if you think about things like the word processor, thinking about it moving online to things like word document processing, essentially they just enabled us to do our work in a clearer, more productive fashion. I think that's very similar on the journey we're going to go on to in AI. Certainly, the tasks that AI can accomplish are more sophisticated, but in the end of the day, it's about enabling. And what hyperscience provides is not just a more efficient way to work. Now, we can read documents, we can extract data, typically that humans would have to hunt and peck through. But
Mhm.
the end result, because we can do it at a higher speed and a higher rate with less friction of human involvement, the efficacy by which you get the services in the government improves. So while it used to may take
Mhm.
you 3 months to get a claim processed, you'll now get it in 3 days. And the
Mhm.
employees can help do other things that are productive for those agencies. So it's not just
Mhm.
about efficiency and replacing jobs, it's about getting the government engine more effective for its citizenry.
We've seen people like Elon Musk and even the current administration saying that they will replace many of the people who are who they're cutting with generative AI. So it seems like there's a clear correlation between, and the government leaders are saying that they are replacing people with generative AI. So can you clarify what your perspective is on that, what you're seeing from the inside?
Sure. So there's certain elements of the government services that will be replaced with AI. So
Hmm.
elements like picking up the phone and taking phone calls can now be handled with a generative
Hmm.
agent. The amount of people it takes to summarize interactions across an interaction with a citizenry
Hmm.
can all be handled now through AI. So there are tasks. And if the government's goal is to reduce overall efficiency,
Hmm.
then I think that's just a macro top-down level assumption. If you look at what
Hmm.
AI is going to provide, it certainly can automate tasks, but it's up to each agency with the capabilities that
Hmm.
AI essentially has provided as to how it wants to now allocate the benefit of that labor
Hmm.
production that AI provides.
Hmm. Now, we've seen that with, let's say, to use the same examples with the Elon Musk's Doge department, AI has resulted in a number of cuts, a number of program changes that have then journalists have exposed as quite problematic in terms of, oh, you're doing a keyword search and you're looking for something for, let's say, DI, and then you come up with things that are like in the Enola Gay aircraft that dropped the first atomic bomb, which obviously has nothing to do with DI. What do you do or how do you manage? What are the appropriate guidelines for generative AI to not fall into these sorts of traps, which, of course, it's not about the tool, it's about incompetent use of the tool. But what do you do to prevent this incompetent use of the tool?
Well, there are methods called human in the loop, but which you can govern the supervision of the model. And so you
Hmm.
set thresholds by which you're confident the model is performing in the way you want it to. And if it's
Hmm.
unsure, then it can bring a human into the loop. So those are just
Hmm.
basic guardrails to the premise of AI. It can do that because it understands a confidence level. Essentially, the more confident it is, it acts autonomously. The less confident it is, it acts more in concert with humans. So there's natural
Hmm.
guardrails. You also have guardrails as you have to train the machines in the first place. So you can
Hmm.
add barriers and things as it's doing its extraction or it's doing its calculations and predictions. You can add guardrails such that it keeps its predictions within a certain boundary. So there are
Hmm.
techniques that you can use essentially to manage that type of interactions with the systems. But a lot of the techniques that you may see at Doge in terms of looking for efficiency are not whiz-bang progressive uses of like generative AI.
Yeah.
It's using things like basic ML, right? So a
Hmm.
lot of our contracts at the government have been scanned and used by Doge. And what they look for are elements of, are we buying the minimum amount of software that we need? Are
Hmm.
the amount of services that are used in connection with the software balanced? Because why would you
Hmm.
pay a lot for software if you're having to pay a lot in services? So a lot of very
Hmm.
basic things that Doge can write, very deterministic type ML to scan through contract language
Hmm.
is a smart way, in my mind, to just make sure that what
Hmm.
the government's purchasing, they're realizing in terms of benefit. And so I think some of those
Hmm.
techniques are not necessarily generative AI. It's just smart ways
Sure.
to apply techniques to understand these are vast agencies. You know, the top five agencies would be some of the top 10 largest companies in the
Hmm.
world. And so you need techniques to help you go through contract languages, service agreements to understand the context of what they're receiving.
Hmm. Tell me a little bit more about how you get good data, because the challenge with government data is that, of course, it's not structured to be used either for ML or for generative AI. So the data lake that we're getting, that I presume that you're dealing with, is not very clean. What do you do to make sure that the data you're using is effectively used and that you don't get false positives or true negatives, or false positives or
It's
false negatives?
It's a great question. Generative AI inside of the government would struggle with one aspect, and one aspect is the data inside of the government has not been scanned and
Yeah.
leveraged by these public generative models. Most of the data inside the government is either trapped because it's in highly structured forms and very
Hmm.
varied types of form information that machines can't read very easily, or it's protected.
Hmm.
It's protected from essentially classified information. So you need different types of tools to go and make that data essentially Gen AI ready or ready for other
Hmm.
techniques. There's a whole set of specialty providers like Hyperscience who've
Hmm.
built AI techniques to go and read that really hard
Hmm.
information. And we do it through a couple of different ways. One,
Hmm.
we allow you to train specialized models. So we have many government workers who are training models that can
Hmm.
read their specific information. We do it at the Veteran Affairs on claims information. We do it at the Social Security Administration, read it
Hmm.
for people who are applying for benefits. We do it for immigration services for people who are applying for
Hmm.
visas and so forth. A lot of complex information that generative models can't read
Hmm.
naturally. They also come in all these varied formats. We allow our citizenry to upload documents, to take pictures with their
Hmm.
phone. They come in messy formats. So there's a
Hmm.
whole class of ML that cleans documents, that helps the government clean the data, read it off of forms, read handwriting, read check boxes, interpret it for the government. And then it gets into a structured format that then you can
Hmm.
send downstream for generative systems or for other systems that the government's using to pay claims or benefits to its citizenry.
So, help me understand about the Social Security as an example. I know that recently the administration asked for Social Security claimants to come into offices in order to claim Social Security benefits, kind of make changes on Social Security benefits. It sounds like AI can do that by them taking photos and then providing information in other ways. Is there some reason why their administration is asking people to come into the office? Do they not have sufficiently good AI tools to process information that people are sending in?
No, it's our ambition to essentially help read all
Hmm.
of the information inside the SSAs. You can imagine it's a vast
Hmm.
system. with a lot of rules and regulations. And so, as those workloads are being able to be
Hmm.
available and used by AI, you do get amazing benefits. So, we're on a 5-year journey. Hyperscience was
Hmm.
awarded an $81 million sole source contract at the SSA, one of the largest document processing agreements
Hmm.
in the world, essentially to help the government solve it. And while it
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily replace jobs, it does make the efficiency of the SSA and the
Hmm.
efficacy of those services. People attach W-2s, and even if those come in uploaded digital
Hmm.
formats, they're varied by different companies and so forth. So there are different formats and different
Hmm.
information and logic
Hmm.
that you have to read off something as simple as a W-2. And
Hmm.
so our software is flexible enough to extract that data in all its
Hmm.
various forms and then make it available for the machines and downstream systems, or where there's issues or errors, that
Hmm.
information is collated more quickly for administration representatives.
Now, you are working with the actual employees at the SSO, at the Social Security Administration, Veterans Affairs Administration, and of course, people are anxious and concerned in this current environment with these threats. How do you make sure that employees are effectively engaged with using your tools? That there's no sabotage, there's no resistance to using tools that people see as threatening their jobs?
Yeah, I'd look at it like all enabling technologies. So what I would
Hmm.
advocate is this is simply just a new tool that's arrived
Hmm.
into the workplace. It's no different than when word processing went online, when we could
Hmm.
start doing things over web through collaboration, when we brought mobile phones, into the office. Mobile phones became another enabling technology.
Hmm.
So with that, there will be learning curves. It's quite a wide spectrum. It's not just a single tool. There's generative tools. There's other ML tools that are available. And so, as that skill gets accrued and benefited from these workers, they'll be
Hmm.
able to provide more benefit to their overall organization. So,
Hmm.
I would think of it as just another ratchet on the overall productivity curve that
Hmm.
technology has always provided. And I think that
Hmm.
what allow them to do is a lot of the things that hyperscience automates humans don't want to do. We're checking
Hmm.
the presence of signatures across a series of documents. It's quite
Hmm.
tedious. It's not a task that
Hmm.
human beings are really good at. So we can automate that task. We're checking that
Hmm.
values are consistent across different forms.
Hmm.
With immigration records, you can imagine
Hmm.
uh, all across the world, there's different grade systems and so forth. That
Hmm.
in Chile, for instance, 1 to 7 is the grading. One is the highest point. In the U.S., it's A to F. So you have different ways in which this information is processed.
Hmm.
Tools like AI can normalize the knowledge that you need to process that.
Hmm.
Those are not easy tasks to go and look up grading systems across the
Hmm.
world when you're trying to process H-1B visa programs. So these new enabling technologies are going
Hmm.
to make, I think, our daily lives better, and I think it'll make the government
Hmm.
much more efficient and effective
Hmm.
over time.
Now, as we finish up, there are, of course, new technologies that are coming out, like agentic AI and other sorts of tools that are going to be even more impactful. We're clearly seeing them coming down the road. As you look forward to the next couple of years, what do you see as the kind of improved benefits that the government should be doing and should be using the technologies that it could be using, and what will be the impact on the government of these technologies?
Yeah, what a wonderful question. So I like to look at the Department of Justice, which is a user of
Mhm.
hyperscience. And this is a unique use case because corporate fraud can be committed anywhere. And
Mhm.
because it can be committed anywhere, when you're pursuing that fraud, you may have to try to get an understanding of the magnitude of that corporate fraud and where it occurred. And so, if you're an investigator in the Department of Justice, you may have thousands of statements from
Mhm.
banks all around the world for long periods of time. Pursuing the corporate fraud and understanding the magnitudes of the puts and takes of debits and credits of corporate fraud, now you can use ML to go and handle those complex statements,
Mhm.
digitize that information, structure that information so you can focus on the investigative work
Mhm.
versus the 90% of your time just keying in and getting that data into a manageable format. If you think about the pursuit of corporate fraud, what used to take years, now you can essentially get a beat on the case much earlier. So
Mhm.
that's an instance where something was very hard, almost unpursuable, to now you can focus on the task at hand.
Mhm.
And I think there are all sorts of those types of use cases. The promise of agentic type uh, executions and workflows is that something can go and happen in the background,
Mhm.
essentially fully automated and orchestrated with high confidence is going to get you the answer, right?
Mhm.
In some of our claims cases, if you think about a veterans, we do 1 billion documents a year.
Mhm.
Some medical histories are between 10 to 20,000 pages long. There's a
Mhm.
lot of complications. And so being able to process that information with new
Mhm.
insight, kick off an agent, can you go get this information about this
Mhm.
particular thread of the individual's background history? Could be profound to helping that person get the proper care or
Mhm.
services that they need. And those types
Mhm.
of things used to be kicked off a task. People would have to have the time to go through and hand process
Mhm.
that. So the agentic process now will handle that in minutes or hours. And I think that at the end of the day, you're going to get better care. You're going to get a
Mhm.
faster approval for your immigration services. You're going to be able to pursue corporate fraud. I think we're going to watch a massive transformation. And while Doge is
Mhm.
getting headlines because there's a chainsaw approach to it, I think at the end of the day, the spirit is that AI and ML is going to help our citizenry. It's going to help our government
Mhm.
provide more effective services to us overall. And I think that's
Mhm.
what the promise of this is really about for those of us who are doing this
Mhm.
work day in and day out with the agencies.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, Andrew. That was very helpful.
Dr. Gleb, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing it with me.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps other people discover the show and helps us improve the show. And if you have any questions, email me at gleb, Gleb, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com.